Thank you all for being here. It's me, Ari Dosset, or for those who have been here for a while, you can just call me Rashid. And I'm here with another live stream for you. And as you can see, I'm going to use my whiteboard again. And I'm using the back camera of my telephone because that one works better than the front camera. The back camera is, the lenses are bigger, so you see things clearer also. So I'll be using that one. And I have my one of my screens over here that I can see the live chat, and I can also see myself. There's a little lag of like 4 seconds, but okay. Based on what I see over there, you can all see me, hear me clearly. But can you confirm to me that you can hear me clearly, please? Let me know in the live chat. Can you hear me clearly? I'll check reaction just over here. I will walk around. Let me know if you can hear me clearly, please. Thank you very much. I want to know if you hear me clearly so I can check the sound settings if necessary. Can you all hear me clearly? Let me know, please. Thank you very much. I see Dion is here, Elaine is here, Tammy is here. Hi, Tammy. Dr. Feline is here. Ricardo's here too. Jigashi. And Ricardo, I'll explain your question later in this live stream. It's not a problem. Okay. So right now, the title of the live stream is Identity. And I put a subtitle, Why You Never Existed. Now, when you get a title like this, some people may say, come on, Rashid, what are you saying I never existed? I'm here, right? No, 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 no. I said the you never existed. Now, let me explain it to you. As human beings, we are social creatures. Well, that's obvious. We're social creatures. But another thing with us is that we are shaped by our environment. Now, as an adult, you can now decide which environment you want to belong to, and you can have an influence how you're further shaped. There's a leverage that an adult has. Children don't have this leverage. It doesn't mean children all end up the same, if they're in the same environment. There are differences based on how the child reacts to the environment, but nevertheless, children don't have this luxury and this leverage to decide, you know what, I get out of this environment, put myself in a better one. As an adult, because your mind is already developed to act, now you can decide, you know what, I don't want to think like this anymore. I want to do this and that. So I'm not saying that as a human being, you're doomed to become like your environment. I'm not saying that. What I do say is that you are shaped by your environment. And there's nothing you can do about it. It's just the way human beings are. You are shaped by your environment. Simple as that. Now, first, I want to explain to you how this thing called identity comes into being. And again, I'm not a psychologist, I'm an anthropologist and sociologist with a lot of historical knowledge. But even as an anthropologist, I do have some psychological insight to how communities operate. So I'm going to explain to you how people develop identities. All right? You can look out for the anthropological and sociological literature out there for yourself. But first, I'm going to put the camera a bit closer. That's my smartphone, so that you can see the closer part of the whiteboard, which is relevant for now. Hold on. Yes. Hold on. Let me just check if I can put this a little bit better like this. Okay. Okay, let me just put it up a little bit. Yes. Okay. You can all see clearly what's on the whiteboard, right? Let me know in the live chat. Can you clearly see now this part of the whiteboard? Okay, my handwriting may be a bit messy, but you can see this clearly, right? Let me know in the live chat. That's confirmation. To see whether or not I should adjust the stance of the smartphone. You can all see this clearly over here. In view, let me know, please. Okay. Diane confirmed she can see it. The rest can see it too? Okay. Now, let's start with an example. You have a woman. All human beings are born out of a woman. Okay, I came out of a woman, you came out of a woman, all human beings came out of women. There are only two human beings, well, actually, three human beings who never came out of a woman. Adam didn't come out of a woman, Eve didn't come out of a woman. Well, actually, those are the only two. My bad. It's only two of them. Christ did come out of a woman, even though he is an incarnation of the Heavenly Father himself. So also, my bad. Two people never came out of women, Adam and Eve. All of us came out of a woman. Okay? So you have this woman being born, and she was born in the country named Japan, in Japanese Nippon. So it's the Japanese people that live there. They speak the Japanese language. So her parents gave her a name, Fumiko or Fumiko. And her family name, the family name of her father was Hato. So Hato became her last name. And in Japan, she had the last name first and the first name. So people address her Hato Fumiko. In the West, when they say the first name first, people call her Fumiko Hato. But anyway, this baby, whom they call Fumiko, she grew up. She learned the Japanese language. She learned she learned a lot about the country, Japan. And the country is located in the continent we call Asia. So she's considered Asian. And she ends up becoming 170 centimeters tall. 170 centimeters tall is quite relatively tall for people in Japan. So everyone in Japan calls her tall. So she's the tall Japanese girl. Now, based on all of this, a public perception is built. If you hear about this woman and her name is Fumiko, you think, Fumiko, that's a Japanese name. It is. You can have a woman that's called Fumiko or Fumiko who's not Japanese. That's possible. But in general, if a woman's called Fumiko, she's like a Japanese. Now, and because Japan has this history of investing in their own country and to expand and to insist on their position in the world, if you're from Japan, people tend to have a natural kind of respect towards you. Despite the horrible past of Japan during the Second World War of the 20th century, but still, if she was born in the United States, she would be a American from Japanese origin. So the way the public would perceive her is different. Because she's from Japan, she's considered an actual Asian woman. If she was born in the United States, also from Japanese ancestry, she would be considered a Japanese American from Japanese ancestry. So the public perception is the way the community sees you, based on facts about your past. Now, these are things you can't change about yourself. That she's 170 centimeters tall, she can't change that. That she was born in this area called Japan, she can't change that. That she, it comes from, again, from continent Asia, you can't change that. Her first name is something she can't decide, you know what, I don't be called Fumiko anymore. And she can go to the municipality and get a name change. She can do that. But there are a lot of things about her she can't change. So she has collective associations. The area of the earth we call Asia is what she's associated with, because she was born on the continent. But from the continent, it's the country Japan she was born in. Those are collective associations. She's 170 centimeters tall. So she's considered tall. But if she goes to the Netherlands, we have people that become like 2 meters or 190 centimeters. She's not considered tall that much. She's considered of a moderate size. So tall is relative to where she is, but nevertheless, is a collective association. Her first name was given to her by her community. Because if the parents would give her a very weird name, the government would intervene. So her identity, in this case, is a combination of the collective associations, how the public perceives her, and how she deals with public perception. Because you cannot prevent the public having perception of you. The public will always have perception of you. The thing is, how do you deal with the public perception? Now, if she gets along with the public perception, that is, there's a harmony between the public's perception and the perception she has of herself. In this case, there's a little bit more harmony in her mentally. But if she rejects if he refuses the public perception of her, now there's annoyance. Now there is discomfort in her. All right? But let's say now she's in harmony with the public's perception. Okay? But now she goes from Japan to, let's say, Australia. And let's say that in Australia, the people have a negative view of Japanese people. Now she's considered in a negative light. Because I'm not saying this, but let's say she goes to a village in Australia or a town in Australia where there's a negative worldview of Japanese people because of the Second World War. Let's say there were veterans from the Second World War that lived there and it told horrible stories about the Japanese military. And in that community, they still have this negative view of Japanese people. If she would end up in that community, the public's perception of her is different. So now she has to adapt to that public perception. And if that public perception is negative towards her, now you have a bigger conflict. So understand this. Your identity as a human being is never something you just make up about yourself. Never. Your identity is a collection of associations by the public and how you relate to it. As simple as that. I mean, this woman can get, let's say, she can come to the Netherlands and get a Dutch passport. She naturalized as a Dutch citizen. And she speaks Dutch, she marries a Dutchman, but at the end of the day, she is not of Dutch ancestry, and she's only Dutch by passport. She's not Dutch by name, by being a native Dutch individual. So that's something she cannot change. So even if she would take a Dutch passport and marry a Dutchman and have children with a Dutchman, the children will not be white children, they'll be Asians with a white parent, biologically speaking. Because half white does not exist. But as I addressed it before already, Europeans are the only ethnicity that doesn't extend. They concede when they bring forth the people from other ethnicities. So let's say Humiko wants to be fully accepted by the Netherlands or by the Dutch society. That will never happen because she's not actually Dutch. She can be seen as a contribution to Dutch society, but she's not native Dutch. Simple as that. So your identity is the public's perception based on associations or associated with you and how you relate to it. So before I continue, is it clear to you now that your identity is not something you're just born with? Do you understand this? Let me know in the live chat. Your identity is not something you're born with. It's something that's associated with you. If you understand this, let me know in the live chat. All right. So this also means that your identity can change over time. Well, not really change that much because certain things about you, certain associations are just factual. They don't change. But let's say Humiko gets married now to a Japanese guy. In this case, she's considered as someone who contributes to her own Japanese people. Let's say she marries a foreigner. In this case, she's still a Japanese to everyone else, but people tend to see her differently because she decided to marry a man from another community. In this case, the identity of her changes. Not only is she a married woman now, but if she's married to a man who's not from her own community, she'll be perceived as less contributing to her own community. Simple as that. Now, she may not be in agreement with this, she'll be upset about it, but hey, that's what it is. So, that's why you have this thing called guilt by association. If you're associated with people that have a negative perception in the community, then that negative perception will rub off on you because you'll be seen as part of the people they view negatively. So identity is something you can play with, so-called. It's something you can contribute to yourself by your self-perception in harmony with the public's perception. You can never get rid of the public's perception. There's something you can never get rid of, but you can decide how to deal with the public's perception. So an identity for a human being, an individual, are collective associations by the public that are repeated socially over and over again. They often documented in documents like a passport or on paper, so they become social facts. A social fact is an established expectation. For example, if I would tell you that uh, riding a bicycle will cause you to lose weight easily, people look at me and they say, Rashid, experts are making claims that lifting weights and cutting off sugar is what contributes to losing weight. It's proven. Also, based on how the body works, what you're saying is not true. But let's say I say that riding a bicycle often will cause you to lose weight. Biologically speaking, factually, it's not true. It's not true at all. It may contribute, but it doesn't mean that just because you ride your bicycle often, you lose weight easily. But if a lot of people believe that riding a bicycle will lead to loss of weight easily, because people believe it and agree on it, it has become a social fact. It's an established expectation. Does that mean this expectation is true? Does it mean this expectation is even healthy? No, it's just an established expectation. So a social fact is established expectation by the public, and they repeat it over and over again. So your identity as a human being are social facts about you and how you relate to it. Now, people that don't follow the Heavenly Father, you can call them worldlings. You can also consider believers that don't walk by faith worldlings too. Even though they're not unbelievers, they operate in a worldly way. Now, this is the fallen mind. This is the mind of all human beings until they're born again. This is the mind we inherited from Adam, after Adam's fall. And it goes like this. You have the now, which is the present, the now. You have an ideal they have. An ideal is an expectation that was established in the past. So the ideal is something from the past that was established. And worldly people, they always want to go from the now to the ideal. And they think they're heading towards the future. They're moving on. They leave the past behind. But in fact, their ideal is something that was established in the past. So when they act towards an ideal, they actually want to go back to the past. So think about this. Their self-perception is they think about themselves that they're moving forward, they're moving on. But in fact, the reality is that they're going around in a circle. For example, let's say you have Humiko. She arrives at a university in Britain. And when she arrives there, she's a bit docile in her attitude, because that's how she was raised in Japan, to be docile. That's what Japanese people expect from a woman to be docile. Let's say, I don't think this is, but let's say that in her part of Japan, they would expect women to be docile. Now, when she's in Britain, she brings a docile attitude with her. Well, but she doesn't do anything else. Let's say the female fellow students in a university in Britain, say in Oxford, get upset with her being so docile, because they grew up with feminism in a feminist way to teach them to be bold and to speak their mind. So you have those British female students who are shaped by their communities through established expectations to be very verbal and to speak their mind. Now, I know, okay, this is more a Dutch thing than a British thing. But in general, in British women and Dutch women have this one Western thing in common, that though the feminism, they tend to think they have the right to speak their mind and to say no, whatever. Okay? So I'm just using Britain example now. Let's say those British female students at Oxford, they have this feminist upbringing, which was an established expectation to them to be very vocal about what they want. That is the ideal of how the community expects them to be as women. It's not was established in the past. So all those women who hold on to this, they are holding on to the past. And because they keep acting like this, they're thinking, hey, I'm a feminist, I'm moving forward, this is the modern day world. No, they're actually going back to the past, psychologically speaking. So them having this ideal is something they hold on to. To them, this is how it should be. This is how it's now. So let's say now they encounter Humiko from Japan, and she's quite docile. There's a clash between the British female students and this exchange student from Japan, Humiko. And because Humiko is not in line with this ideal which has been established in British society, now they kind of oppose Humiko. They give a no to Humiko. Why? Because this is how it is. Those British female students operate psychologically in this ideal, which is in the past. So they have a mind of the past. When they encounter Humiko, Humiko shows them that they're in the past. Because Humiko reveals to them that their ideal is just that, an established expectation. So when they encounter Humiko, the cycle goes back to the now. They're confronted with how things really are. And they say, no, we don't want to go there. We want to stay over here. So Humiko gets a firm no from them. Let's say those British students encounter a Spanish exchange students, and the Spanish exchange student, even though she's Catholic and they are Protestant, they get along because they both have this feminist idea. So when those British female students encounter Jessica from Spain, they both went from the now to the ideal. So from the now to the ideal is a honeymoon phase. That's the yes worldlings want. When the reality interrupts the ideal from the past, that's a no. They don't want to go through this. So once this happens, we want to go right back to the ideal. So worldlings, their identity is based on establishments from the past. And whenever something is in line with those psychological establishments, they are attached to it. That's the like. They attach to it in a positive way. That means that's to them. So when something appears in front of them that triggers their ideals, they like it. When they encounter something, in this case, the British exchange students encounter Humiko, and it's not in sync with their ideal, now they get shocked. Now they dislike her. They dislike it. So dislike is a no to reality. Like is embracing an ideal that's reflected in daily life. So this is what the Bible calls being double-minded. It's actually being internally divided because you always go from the reality to an ideal, and you always want to cling onto the ideal and refuse anything that is not in sync with the ideal. So yes and no are actually the same thing. It's you clinging onto the past. Now, it's written in James chapter 1, verse 8. If you're double-minded, you won't receive anything from the Heavenly Father when you pray for it. Now, people with a mindset like this, can they ever have peace? I'm asking a question. Can people with a mind like this ever have peace? Let me know in the live chat, please. Just let me know in the live chat now. Can people with a mind like this, can they ever have peace? I'm behind the smartphone now to check your answers, because remember the screen over there has a lag of like 5 seconds. Okay, Dion gave me an answer. What does the rest think? Can anyone, man or woman, with this mind ever have peace? Okay, I got some more answers. Okay. So people with a mind like this, they are in a continuous survival mode. Why? Because the ideal is something that's been established socially. But just because something's established doesn't mean it's proper. For example, you can live in Britain where it's established that you drive on the left side of the road. Is there anything wrong with driving on the left side? No. You go to the Netherlands, crossing the North Sea, and drive on the right side of the road. Is there anything wrong with driving on the right side of the road? No, there's not. So those are just objective things that people can agree upon. But let's say now, people established in a community that you never talk back to your parents. Even when your parents are wrong and abusive, just take whatever your parents do to you. That can be an established expectation. Does this mean that just because it's a social fact, it's a good one, it's a healthy one, and something you should agree with? No. So things that are socially established, they don't have to be wrong. They can be good things too. But you have to examine social facts. And here's the thing. Most people don't examine social facts, you only compare. For example, Humiko from Japan has a more docile attitude in how she interacts with people. The British women have a more into-your-face attitude. So the British women compare their attitude with Fumiko's attitude, and they say, no, no, we don't want this. They refuse it. So they dislike it. They're just comparing what's out there, and whatever is in harmony with their ideal, they cling on to. And they think they examine things. No, examination means checking what is actually expected. And is this expectation even in harmony with reality? And is this expectation even worth it? That's examining things. Examining also means checking the timing. Why is this expected? But if you are holding on to the past, which is ideal, then the only way you can be at ease, because you have no peace, you only have ease. The only way you can have ease psychologically is if you're never challenged. So everyone around you has to be similar to the yes, to this ideal. And you have to avoid everyone who's similar to the no. So yes and no are both parts of the cycle of escapism. That's why Jesus says, don't swear with anything. Let your yes be yes and your no be no. Everything more than that is out of evil. Some people say, oh, Jesus said, make up your mind and stick to it. That's not what Jesus said. Yes and no are part of the cycle of escapism. Let your yes be yes and your no be no. So what Jesus was saying is, let go of this yes and no cycle. Learn to be flexible in daily life. That's what Jesus taught us. That's how Jesus even acted himself. But a lot of people, they misread what Jesus actually said. Same with turning the other cheek. Jesus didn't literally mean that if someone slaps you like this, that you have to actually bend over, let him slap you here too, and hurt you again. Jesus didn't mean that. But a lot of people literally think that turn on cheek literally means you're slapped here, now you have to let this happen too. That's not what Jesus literally meant. Turning the other cheek simply means you check the situation and you make sure you escape, you not escape, you get out of the situation without having to harm yourself nor the other individual. So let your yes be yes, as you know, we know, is figurative, it's not literal. But a lot of people take it literal and end up being stuck in self-destructive mindsets. Now, people that aren't renewed in their mind, they're chasing a past that never happened. Why do I say this never happened? Because here's the thing. If something works, it works. You can continue to do it. But if something does not work, that means that the success never happened. Okay, if people drive on the left side on the road in Britain and it works, okay, keep driving on the left side of the road. If people tend to eat a lot of fish in a community and they're physically healthy, well, continue to eat fish, nothing wrong with that. But if people have an ideal of how things should be, but how things should be is in conflict with how things actually are, that they need to adapt and change their ideal to match what's really possible in here and now. Anytime anyone holds on to something that's established in the past without checking whether or not it's compatible with the present or even the future to come, they're operating in a cycle of escapism. So they're chasing a successful past that never happened. And that's the common thing with people in the world. They're chasing a past that never happened. Okay, let me give an easy example of chasing a past that never happened. Let's say your parents were emotionally neglectful. Your parents were not evil people, but they were dysfunctional, and therefore they neglected you emotionally. Okay, you're upset with the impact your parents had on you. Because your parents were emotionally neglectful, listen, your parents were emotionally neglected themselves, so they never got healing, never recovered. There's no excuse for them to remain that way, but still, that's how they were. That's how you were raised, being emotionally neglected. Now you, as an adult, you have psychological issues to deal with. But no, you have the ideal that your parents should be emotionally mature and should have emotional, healthy childhood. You have this ideal that you don't have any psychological issues. But here's the issue. You do have psychological issues based on how your parents raised you. So you have to face the issues in the now so that it can be resolved. But instead, you're angry that things are not the way they should be. Now listen, the way they should be doesn't have to be wrong. It should be like this, that your parents are emotionally mature and you grow up in an emotionally nurturing environment. That's how it should be for every human being. That ideal is based on reality. It's a real thing you expect. But here's the thing. They were not emotionally mature, and now you have emotional issues to deal with too. You need to accept it and deal with it. So if you remain angry with your parents, and you're right, your parents have no excuse to remain dysfunctional like that and to affect you like that. But look at this, your parents were part of the community. Are you also upset with the community that also neglected your parents and neglected you? Because the community could have intervened. If your parents were emotionally messed up, the community at least could have been involved in your life as a child to actually make sure there are better factors around. Did the community intervene when your parents were neglectful towards you emotionally? No. So why are you only upset with your parents? Because you have this ideal that society is good, that society is always maturing, all that. So you have ideals that actually, listen, the ideal that parents should be emotionally mature, that's factual. You can prove that scientifically, that's proper. But your ideal that is think of society is a mature movement. I'm sorry, but if society is a mature movement, how come we still have poverty, crime, all those other conflicts that we have that's been haunting us for centuries? So you have an established expectation from the past, and this expectation never played out well. So you're holding on to a past that never happened. So you not forgiving your parents, you chasing a past that never happened. Chasing the past is never a good idea. You can reflect on the past, but you shouldn't look into the past. Looking to the past means you're chasing it. You want to go back. Reflecting on the past means you reflect and examine what happened so you can process it and be better today. Unforgiveness is chasing a past that never happened. Look, if your husband left you for some mistress, you're upset because the ideal of him staying loyal to you didn't happen. This thing, no matter how angry you become, the now shows you that he's not loyal. So that loyalty that you expected never happened. So the more you remain angry with him for leaving you, the more you're chasing a past that never happened. And now you want to look for something similar to that, and you end up in the same predicament. So chasing a past that never happened is the way people in the world operate. And you can also go down over here, which explains a little bit more. The mind of worldlings operates by attachment. Attachment is not something wrong in itself. Being attached to something doesn't mean you're attachment is not an addiction, just you being attached to something. But this attachment to our environment we call the me or the I. And we want to hold on to it, that's why it turns into mine, possessive. So property is a claim to control things. That's why things like public property, where everyone's allowed to come, private property, we're allowed to come, we have consent to be over there or a right to be there. So this controlling, that's what worldlings do all the time, control. They want to use the leverage to control outcomes, to validate the me or their identity. But their identity, as you can see, is superficial, based on rejection. Because this is a cycle of rejection over here, in which you're in continuous survival mode. So, worldlings always end up with this duality, me versus you, us versus them. Now, don't get me wrong. If this is Kevin and this is Bart, Bart and Kevin are two males, two human beings. But they're not fully disconnected because they're both on the earth, needing the same earth. You know what I mean? And they're both human beings with similar needs also. But we tend to hold on to other human beings who are similar to our idea of how we were shaped. And we call them the us. And everyone that's not part of it, we call the them. And we think the us is safe, the them is dangerous. It's a delusion that we need to unlearn once we become born again. So self-gratification, or it's all about validating the self. The self is this ideal that has been established in the past. If someone tells you, listen, I'm a serious man, I don't joke around. That is an identity, something you associate yourself with based on what you perceive to be working. So that is an established expectation that's been established in the past. But is it proper? You don't want to hear about that. You just don't want to be challenged. Now, okay. What this comes down to, and I'm going to move the smartphone a little bit over here. Hold on. I've explained this one time before, and let me just put this a little bit over here. Worldlings want an unchallenged self-perception. They want a self-perception, so the way they look at themselves is never challenged. And this is simply impossible when you're dealing with other people, and especially dealing with the community, because your self-perception is shaped by the public's perception. So to have an unchallenged self-perception, that itself is a delusional expectation. But worldlings, they cling onto this. Another way to say they want an unchallenged self-perception is they want ontological security. This is the philosophical term. I didn't invent this term. It's a term you see philosophers use, ontological security. Ontologists deal with the philosophy of being, of existing. So they want an unchallenged self-perception. And the only way for them to perpetrate this unchallenged self-perception is by being around other people who are operating in a similar escapism. That this collective escape is what we call society, or what the Bible calls the world. So society, or what the Bible calls the world, is organized fighting. What are they fighting? They are fighting daily life. They're all in this yes and no duality of rejection, and they're fighting anyone who triggers a no inside of them. So, before I continue, hold on. Is it clear unto you now that worldlings never truly have peace? They do have ease, don't get me wrong, they have ease. They can have psychological ease and also social ease with one another, but they never truly have peace. For you to have peace, the Prince of Peace, Christ, must be present, which means you have to be in harmony with his leadership over you. If you're not in harmony with Christ's leadership over you, there is no peace. Because you, as a fragile and vulnerable creature, cannot secure yourself. Neither can the community secure you in the long run. So you always have this anxiety that pops up. All right? Now, I'm going to do another illustration. I use this Humiko Hato, this fictional character over here. Now I'm going to do another one over here. Just bear with me. Hold on. Wait, let me. Good. Let me see. Yeah, it is better. There's a little bit of much light around, but okay. Okay, good. I'll just do it like this. Okay. In the year 1777, in Britain, a boy is born. This boy was called Kevin. Again, your first name is association from the community towards you. You can become attached to your first name, especially how they spell it in your language, but it's just association, okay? His family was Jackson, okay? So Kevin Jackson, he grew up in England. He eventually joined the Navy. After leaving the Navy, he actually became a mine worker, and he worked in mines. He got married, had several children. He died respectably old age for the people of his time, because mine workers normally die prematurely due to all the stress and exhaustion on their physical bodies, but he lived relatively long. His great-grandsons, he had great-grandchildren, all born around 1901. This was 1906. And after the Second World War, his great-grandchildren, three of them, James, Don, and Jack, decided, you know what, we're going to move away from Britain. We want to be around here. James decided to move to Australia. Back then, still part of the British Empire. Don decided, let me move to the United States, which hasn't been part of the British Empire for a while. Jack decided, man, let me go to Canada, just very close, let me say close to Britain, I'm going to Canada. So James goes to Australia, Don goes to the United States, and Jack goes to Canada. They marry women over there. Or let me say, they have their wives already from England, they go over there. His children are born in Australia. His children are born in the United States, and his children are born in Canada. So His children get a Canadian passport, his children get a United States passport, and his children get an Australian passport. Now, go back 4 generations further. Their grandsons. This was born 1995. Stephen, Stephen. The other one is Henry. One is Jack. Now, let's say 2022. Stephen is 27. Don is 31. And Jack is 22. Okay? They're all grown men now. Now, Stephen, okay, let me write it back here. Just to Stephen over here is called an Australian because he and his grandparents and parents were all born in Australia. He speaks the Australian accent of English also. Henry is born in the United States. He speaks American English, that accent, so he's called an American. His grandparents and parents were all from the United States. Jack, his grandparents and parents, all from Canada. He's called Canadian, speaks Canadian English, which is kind of similar to American English in some areas. Jack becomes a bank employee, working full-time at the bank. Henry, due to some privilege in his life, he became a millionaire early in life. James came from an abusive household, and he ended up in criminality. He went to prison, and he is an ex-convict, now he works at a supermarket. Now, these three men over here, 27-year-old Stephen, 31-year-old Henry, and 32-year-old Jack, they're all Anglo-Saxon men. We look at a picture of them, even look like one another. Why? Because they are from the same family line. Because their great-grandfathers, James, Don, and Jack, were actually brothers of one another. And they all were grandsons of this Kevin Jackson. Now, they're all white males, European males, Anglo-Saxon ancestry, descended this Anglo-Saxon over here, Kevin Jackson. They even have the last name Jackson also. So his genes live forth into all of them. They're different human beings than he is, of course. He also lived in different time periods. But they're all similar. But still, James, who's an ex-convict, the public perception of him is that he's a bad guy, it's bad news. Henry, people perceive him as good news, a millionaire, a hardworking American. So Americans have this obsession with hard work because he's considered a hardworking American, even though he never worked hard in his life. It's not considered like that. And then you have this guy considered a law-abiding citizen because he always keeps himself, never bothers anyone else. Now, three men from the same family, because the great-grandfathers were all brothers, but one is now an Australian, other an American, other a Canadian, and they don't know one another. To James, let me say to Stephen, Henry, and Jack are strangers. Let's say Jack would act as Stephen on Facebook. Stephen think, who's this Jack Jackson? I know a Jack Jackson. And he's from Canada. I know he's from Canada. He's a stranger. Well, actually, they're relatives. Closer than they think. But because they grow up in different areas, they have different identities based on the public's perception. Because think about it. When James, Don, let me say, when James, Don, and Jack were alive, only the United States was considered a different place. But Canada and Australia were still part of the British Empire, an extension of the so-called motherland, Britain. So all the people there were British people. But now, 4 generations later, people in Australia are fully considered Australians, not an extension of Britain anymore. Canadians, fully themselves Canadians, not an extension of Britain either. So these are all Anglo-Saxons. But you will never hear people call them Anglo-Saxons. They will call them Australian, American, Canadian. So understand this. Your identity is just something you come up with. It relates to your ancestry, but also based on the present expectations. Australia is not perceived as part of the British Empire anymore. So that's why nobody will call this guy British, even though his ancestry is British. He's from the Anglo-Saxons. This guy is also from British Anglo-Saxon ancestry, but everyone calls them Canadian, not British. Why? Because people in Canada want to be remembered they are a separate kingdom from the United Kingdom. That's why. Even though they share the same king as Britain, which today is Charles III. So, what it comes down to is that all these three men who are alive today, they have a lot in common, but they just don't see that way. So their self-perception is not in line with reality. So in reality, they're quite similar. They even look similar. They speak the same language, English. But because they grew up in three different locations, the environments around them had different perceptions of them. And based on that, this guy identifies Australian, this one as American, this one as Canadian. But they're all Anglo-Saxons. But they will never call themselves like that in daily life. All right? So understand this. Kevin Jackson was a mine worker. Okay? He had a low esteem in the community. He was even neglected by his own people. When it goes down the bloodline, you see that 8 generations later, one of his male descendants, Stephen Jackson, goes through similar things he went through, neglected by his own family. And the others in the family also went through the same thing. So the neglect cycle of neglect he went through passed down and ended up also affecting Stephen. So Stephen did not become this criminal just by his own choice. Yes, he did make criminal decisions in his life that he has to take responsibility for, but it was like he decided one day, man, I'm just going to become a criminal. He didn't come out of his mother's womb as a criminal. He was shaped to a criminal, not only by his own actions, but also by how people reacted to his actions. And also, the reason he joined a gang because he wanted this family structure that he missed. He wouldn't even think about joining a gang if there was an actual functional community around him. So yes, you do make decisions as an adult, but your decisions also are made in a context. You take responsibility doesn't mean it's all on you. If you make a wrong decision and people escalate against you, means they make it worse. If you make a wrong decision and say, you want me to deal with this and they look for a solution, now that's different. So they can't put all the outcomes on you because the community is always involved. But the world or society always want to put it, when things go wrong, they put it all on the individual. They never look at the whole community that's also shaped them or is also accountable. But here's the thing. Henry Jackson, who's a millionaire, people claim, oh, he's one of us. He's American. Okay, his grandparents were British, but he's American. He's a hardworking American. He grew up over here. Here's the thing. If this Henry Jackson would go to prison for some sex scandal, suddenly nobody wants to claim it anymore. That's how society or the world is. They want to claim all the good and deny the bad that they're responsible for. Just because an individual makes wrong decisions doesn't mean the community doesn't play a role in this individual becoming that way. Okay, eventually the individual has to take responsibility to become better, but the community is also not off the hook. So understand this. The you thought you are never existed. You, and I'm saying like it is, are an accumulation of social facts that's been established in the past. Now, this does not mean that you are not an actual human being with your own thoughts and feelings. You are. But your thoughts and feelings are shaped by the environment more than you realize. So when you think about yourself, in this case, when you think about yourself, or from your perspective, me, the me or the I is a relationship you have between your own view of yourself and the view others have of you. And that's why people in the world tend to perpetrate their boundaries. A boundary is when you put restrictions on someone else to get along with your escape. You want things a certain way, so now you put restrictions and limits on others to achieve it. That's boundaries. And boundaries come from the word binding. And religion comes from the Latin word religare. Religare means to bind again. So boundaries are a religious method to escape and to verify your self-perception. And when you encounter people that don't get along with this verification, You give them a no. You say, as a fair ties, this is my boundary. I'm done with you. Or you attack them either yourself or through the legal system, take action against them to verify your self-perception. Because boundaries only work if you can inflict them on someone else. If you can't successfully bind someone else, then your perception of yourself is endangered. And that's why worldlings have the tendency to want to be around people that they, at least from their minds, can control. If worldlings don't have some leverage over you, often they're not comfortable with you because their whole mindset is about chasing the past that never happened. And they don't want this insanity to be open and exposed. So they only want to be around you if they can have something on you to use against you, just to push you to get along with their escapism. Because remember, the fallen mind is in a it's always fighting. Society is organized fighting against anyone who else want to get along with this. Society can only function if there are victims that you compare yourself to. So I hope this is clear. So if you encounter a situation in which someone is leeching off of you emotionally, you may think, hey, get your own identity. For example, let's say you have two women. One of them just goes to work every day. And you have another one imitating her in everything. All human beings imitate one another. It's through imitation we learn our native language, through imitation that we become similar and we build communities. So imitation is natural. We all imitate one another as human beings. But here's the issue. If you imitate someone just to escape, now that's problematic. Now, in the world, you have people who are, how to say, they're part of society, and because they're part of society, their self-perception is validated through social facts. Such people have ease. But people who are looked down upon or were neglected by this thing by others, their self-perception tends to be unstable. So when you see someone who has a stable self-perception, stable in a sense is validated by social facts, because all identities in the world are unstable, but it's more stable in you when it's validated by the group. So let's say you have one woman whose identity is validated by the group, and another woman who is neglected. The neglected woman may falsely perceive the woman that's established by the community to be all that. And she begins to leech off her, always want to talk to her, want to look like her, dress like her. And the other woman thinks, whoa, why are you so obsessed with me? Get your own identity. Listen, there is no such thing as an own identity. That's what I'm pointing out to you. The woman whose identity is validated by the community and the other woman who's neglected, they're both doing the same thing. They're both chasing a past that never happened. But it's the issue. The one woman is successful in it, that's why she has more psychological ease. The other woman was neglected more, her dysfunction is more into your face. And because her dysfunction into your face, people tend to say, oh man, that woman is toxic. She's this and that. But the truth is, both are toxic. The one is toxic, but her toxicity is celebrated. She so-called minds her own business, she leaves people alone, blah, blah, blah. The other one, her toxicity, reveals the insanity of the world. And because she reveals the insanity of the world by her dysfunction, people tend to look down and say, man, she's toxic and that. No, 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 both are toxic. So there is no such thing as an own identity. All right? But now, what about believers who operate in faith? Believers, our identity comes from the Heavenly Father. So that means that our social identity in the world is of secondary relevance. But to people who don't serve the Heavenly Father, this is of primary relevance. Because think about it. If people perceive you in a negative way, they will treat you in a negative way too. And that can be dangerous to you. If nobody likes you somewhere, you're going to feel danger. People are going to neglect you, treat you badly. It's going to harm you psychologically and physically. So people that don't have the protection of the Holy Spirit, people don't have the resurrection of Christ work on their behalf, the only thing they have is to get along people's expectations in the hope that they're included. That's the only thing people in the world have. So that's why people in the world are so primarily concerned with how others think about them. And people who don't care what others think about them are delusional. They often get in conflict. How others think about you is relevant. But here's the thing. To believers, their social identity is of secondary relevance. Their primary relevance is that they are founded and established in Christ. And that's the difference between believers and unbelievers. The unbeliever, they don't have this psychic spiritual basis. Believers do. All right? But now there are believers who continue in escapism. What happens is some of them persist in escapism to such an extent that they end up dying for their time. That's sin unto death. Sin unto death is when a believer continues in escaping to such an extent they end up destroying and killing themselves. That's sin unto death. Sin not unto death is when the believer is still escaping, but eventually he realizes something is off. Okay, let me give two examples. Let's say you have a believer who keeps smoking all the time, 50 cigarettes a day. That believer ends up dying very quickly. Then you have another believer who's just a bit lazy of not doing things in life. Now, both are dysfunctional, but the laziness is not as detrimental as smoking 50 cigarettes a day. So the laziness is sin not unto death. It's still sin, but that's the sin you can actually survive. The other guy who smokes cigarettes every day, harm his own lungs, that's a sin you likely may not survive. For example, a woman that stays in a bad sexual relationship, even though the red flags are there, she will likely get killed by that boyfriend or husband. Sin unto death. Another woman maybe going to church every Sunday and she's not really moving forward in life. There's also a sin, but there's something she can survive. So is it clear to you what sin unto death is and what sin not unto death is? Is it clear to you now? Let me know in the live chat. Someone asked it, so that's why I'm asking. Is it clear to you now? Well, Tammy, you're wrong in this. An identity disorder does exist because there are identities out there. There are identities, but the identity disorder is when I'm just describing it. Go to an actual psychologist, get in-depth knowledge about it. An identity disorder is when your self-perception is problematic with reality and how you relate to other people. That's an identity disorder. So identity disorders do exist, but they are a problem in your self-perception being problematic. All right? So, unlearn becoming upset with people who are, listen, when someone is kind of leeching off of you, that's not a healthy situation. You should move away from that. And you should address the individual to look for help and all that. It's not help someone to leech off of you emotionally. Absolutely not. There's the issue. Don't look down on saying, my God, you don't have your own identity. Listen, none of us have our own identities. None of us, believer or unbeliever, have our own identities. You get your identity from your environment that raised you, and as a believer, you also are imputed the identity of Christ inside of you. None of us are born with our own identity. It doesn't exist. Now, you can shape your own identity and give form to it yourself as an adult. You should do that in a positive way, but you don't just have your own identity just by yourself, independent from other people. It doesn't exist. So if someone's listening off of you, they have no community keeping them mentally in check. That's it. And that's why they're so almost addicted to you. So if you encourage someone who's kind of stalkish towards you, because they're so into you, listen, pray for them, minister on them from a distance, and keep moving. Don't say, build your own identity. There is no such thing as an own identity. It doesn't exist. The self does not exist. What does exist is you, the human being, with psychological needs, and you develop an identity in a community. And as a believer, you get the imputed identity from the Heavenly Father. That's what exists. Because when you believe you have your own identity, that can cause an actual identity disorder because now you'll perceive yourself like a deity, like a god, independent from the community, and you're never independent from the community. That's why loners and people that are antisocial tend to have a lot of psychological problems. They also have a lot of physical issues also. Why? Because as a human being, without any social involvement with other people, you get physically sick. The stress makes you physically sick. You will lose your mind without social interaction. So even antisocial people that look for other antisocial people to relate to, you need human relationships. So the whole idea of an own identity, it does not exist. And it never exists and it never will exist. Okay? So that's why children, not adult children, are told in the New Testament, obey your parents in the Lord. Don't just obey your parents just because you're parents. There must be a condition on your parents, because if your parents are not safe, you should get help. The community should intervene. Obey your parents in the Lord. Adults don't obey parents, they obey their Heavenly Father. You shouldn't, even as a child, should obey God before your parents anyway. But anyway, an own identity does not exist. Now, I understand people say own identity simply means just look for your own thing in life, but listen, you're not a deity, you're not a God. Your identity here on earth is a relationship between how the public sees you and how you relate to that. And as a believer, you get an eternal identity established in Christ. So your identity in Christ you get as a believer. You still need the social identity with other people on earth. But what overrules all of that is your identity in Christ. And that's advantage and security believer. Our identity in Christ overrules the identity we have down here. So is it clear unto you now how human identities work? Let me know in the live chat. Let me know. Is it clear to you all? Let me know in the live chat, please. Thank you very much. So understand it also. Worldlings, they have no peace. They have no long-term certainty about anything. Believers do. So when worldlings turn pagan and establish things in daily life, and you have believers only going to church, well, that's an embarrassment. I want you to understand this so you won't misidentify yourself as something you're not. Okay? So we all have identities, nothing wrong with that. Some identities are more positive, some more negative, but we all have identities. What should overall that's your identity in Christ. All right? So are there any more questions about this topic? Please let me know now. Thank you. I'm going to check the other side, see if I get any questions. Oh, and by the way, and that's why propaganda works so easily on worldly people, because they're all in a cycle of rejection to gratify self. As long as they're in the cycle, no actual long-term improvement will happen. Worldlings go from bad to worse. And between the bad and the worse is a space of relief in which you think things have become better. But all worldlings go from bad to worse. They never go from bad to better. They go from bad to worse. But between the bad and the worse is a little ease, space of ease over there. That's a deception. Believers should be going from bad to better. But it's only possible when you're out of this escapism, this cycle of rejection. All right? Let me see. I'll just wait for a half a minute more to see if I get any questions. If not, I'll close down the live stream. I see many of you engaged in the live chat also. I'm glad about that. I saw Chuba was here too. I'm glad you were here, Chuba. It must be morning for you now there, over where you're now. So glad you came to the live stream anyway. Okay, I don't know why you asked this question about working from from money, but here's the issue. Currency is the currency and money. Currency is what you use to exchange goods and services. Okay? Money is currency in use. If I have American dollars and I go here in the Netherlands with it to buy something, I have currency, but not money. What's money here is the euro. If I take the euro, go into America, I need to exchange it for American dollars because the euro is currency there, but not money. Money is currency in use. Okay? Now, you can use money. Money is just a tool you use, but you never rely on money. And that's an issue. Too many people are relying on money. And that's a problem. All right? Amen. Yes, and Father will keep me safe. Thank you, Ricardo. Praise the Lord. Actually, you shouldn't even work for money. Money should be working for you. But that's going to be a whole other topic I'll discuss later on. Okay. Absolutely, Chuba. It's not wise to be unequally yoked with unbelievers. By the way, even if someone is a believer, if a believer continues in this over here, you shouldn't be yoked with them either. So it's also believers that remain in darkness you need to watch out for, because they become portals of misfortune to you. Always in a continuous survival mode, collectively, always fighting. That's what society is. Going from yes to no, yes to no, yes, no, yes, no, like this, like this, like on and on and on, exhausting. And when the exhaustion comes too much, they look for victims to explode on. Everyone continues. That's society. That's the world. No solution in the long run. Going from bad to worse. So don't expect long-term improvement from worldlings. It cannot happen. No, let me see. Questions were there. Diane said, I read once, money only has value only because you can purchase what validates. Well, that's true. Elaine, you may have to replay the live stream because being double-minded is simply the way the follow mind operates. Always holding on to the ideal of how you want things to be, able to bind others through boundaries to get along with it. If that succeeds, you're happy. If reality brings you back to the now, no. If you can escape back to ideal, it's a yes. Yes and no are two sides of the same coin. So let your yes be yes and your no be no. What Jesus really meant is leave this yes and no cycle behind and be flexible and practical in daily life. That's what Christ meant. Similar that turn your other cheek was symbolic. Well, let your yes be yes and your no was all symbolic, not a literal thing that you should follow. All right. Let me see over here. Okay. I didn't miss any questions. Thank you all for being here. Keep agreeing with Christ. Be at peace. Enjoy the Shabbat. And I'll see you next time. God is good all the time.